Welcome to the garden question and answer video that I do on Sundays. I think Steph has written down, let's see, 22 for this one. Actually already have the 19 for the next one after that. So again, I've been talking about having an extra Q&A at some point. We definitely have enough questions to do that. I appreciate everyone asking questions. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video. That's where we pick from each week. Let's see. The older t-shirts in the store at the HortTube.com are all $5 off. And I think that's it. I think we're going to just jump right into some questions this week. Normally I talk for about 4 or 5 minutes before we jump in, but today we're gonna do it faster. Somebody asked whatever happened to the Romeo Clara. So we have got a Romeo Clara back here in a corner, which is ultimately going to fill that corner up. It doesn't get a lot of light back there though to have, it hasn't grown a whole lot yet, but it's a really pretty plant. I highly recommend that plant. I put Juliet Clara in a video that probably will be after this video. You can see it, and you're seeing some images of Romeo right now. There's a little bit of difference in the variegation on those two. The Romeo is a little bit yellower. Juliet is a little more like an off-white variegation in it, but both are really good. And just happened to be in Lowe's the other day, and the Lowe's in Cary here near me, near Raleigh, had a ton of them. So it is a plant that is actually out there and available. Is the pH of the water you use to water your plants important? Their well water has a really high pH, and their plants are actually suffering. So, you know, yes, the water pH does matter. In fact, like, you know, I talked about last week, have done some consultation work for people, you know, thinking about starting nurseries and stuff. And this is my #1 question. Water is everything in the nursery business. It really, really affects the nursery business because it can radically alter the pH of the soil in a container when you're using bark mixes and compost mixes and that kind of thing. It really very quickly can change the pH in those. So you either have to adjust the pH in the soil or adjust the pH of your water in order to, you know, in order to use very alkaline water like that. Ideally, we would have a pH of between 6 and about 7.5 in our gardens. 6.5 is probably the absolute sweet spot where most nutrients are available. There's a video on the channel about that. High pH water can have an impact. It does matter what is making the pH high. As to the pH of the water high, it could be different. It could be different chemistry basically making the pH high of the water, and depending on what is driving the high pH of the water will determine how rapid of a change it could probably make to your soil. So that, I'm not going to do the overcomplicated version of this, but yes, very, very alkaline water will raise the pH of your soil sometimes very, very slowly, sometimes much quicker probably. And then, so, you know, your surface water would probably more reflect the water that's in your soil, right? So if you had a pond you were pumping from, you know, the pond water would have been runoff from the soil, you know, surface, you know, of the, you know, around the surrounding area. So it's going to be probably more similar. But when this is a deep well, I mean, or well water, and so it could be down in a lime, you know, you could be drilling through lime to get down to, you know, limestone to get down to that water, and so you end up with potentially a higher pH. So you see how that could work. You could have perfect acidic soil up at the top, you know, or barely acidic soil, which would kind of be perfect, but then be pumping water up that's very, very alkaline. So yes, it could have an impact. There are, you know, I guess you can add sulfuric acid and other things that you can do to, you know, change. You can alter your water, you know, for this purpose. But yes, and then, you know, you got to test your own. You got to test your soil, you know, as well. You know you have a high pH in this water. That's definitely going to affect your containers. I mean, there's no 100% chance of that. Maybe a little bit slower on the stuff that's in the ground. But if you see stuff suffering, then I would get the, you know, I'd test your pH of your soil too. It's a great question. It's a little more complicated as to, you know, how fast or how slow it would change soil potentially, but it will have an impact. And again, that sweet spot, if you go back and watch why pH is so important, it's an older video on the channel. It's not one of my great masterpieces, that's for sure, but I think you'd learn a lot about why soil pH is so important. There are plants that will take high pH soils, you know, without any problem. They've evolved in limestone, you know, spaces or various places on the planet where plants are all over the globe, despite pH differences all over the globe. So, you know, there are plants that will match your soil pH. Okay, so this person wants to apply a layer of compost in the fall to their garden. I guess it's their vegetable garden, maybe annual beds, I don't really know. Or they're mulching with the compost, I don't really know. Would it stimulate growth? They already did some in the spring, and they were thinking about adding some more in the fall. So if the compost is thinned a bit, washed around a bit or whatever, and you want to add some additional, a layer to it, maybe to hold some moisture in place, continue to build, you know, be building your soil, you can absolutely do it in the fall. It's not going to stimulate plant growth at all. So the things that are in the nutrients that are available in that compost would probably need to be broken down additionally and made into available forms for your plants, and the things that would do that are going to be slowing down in the fall as well. So, you know, this is again, I've said this many times, the beauty of using organic stuff is it will only work when the soil microbes are active. And so if it's winter time and, you know, you happen to use something organic, it's not going to really alter the plant's behavior in any way. Let's see. This person planted a crepe myrtle and they tip pruned it, so they took the flowers off the top of it. I've talked about this a bunch. If you're going to buy these full flowered shrubs in the middle of summer, let's say it's a, you know, clethra or hydrangea paniculata, crepe myrtle, vitex, butterfly bush, there's lots of things that will, not as many things as flower in the spring, but there's certainly some summer flowering shrubs and trees. It is probably good, if you're deciding to plant them and it's still summertime, you know, to take those flowers off. They were worried that they might spur on some new growth. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I don't think the plant's really going to be thinking about putting energy into new growth. It could potentially, by the time we get a frost, if you've got still have pretty long days, it gets some warm temperatures, you could see a little, where you cut it, a little bit of growth forming around those buds. It's ultimately not going to hurt it. Not going to worry about that. The main thing is I don't want that plant to go through an adjustment where you've damaged the roots. It's dry here. We had a little bit of misty rain today, which I don't think is probably added up to much, but if I dig down anywhere here, it's pretty dry. And the plant's still trying to flower and do all the functions. It's really hard, so I've just always tip pruned things. We would do that when we move something from one container to another at the nursery. If I moved a 1 gallon sky pencil holly into a 3 gallon container in the summer when we were potting them up, off with their heads. You know, we take about this much off the top of them. That's where that new growth is. If you take that new growth or that flower or whatever off the top of it, it can put the energy into rooting and not try to put the energy into growing. Is there a way to hasten the decomposition process of leaves? They have some willow oaks. So willow oaks have the smaller, narrower leaf. Some people don't like at all, although I think willow oaks are amongst the most beautiful oaks, just structurally, always beautiful. Yeah, the best way to do it is to cut them up in some way, a little bit. You don't have to cut them down to nothing, but if you can get some additional edges on them, those whole leaves are really, you need jagged edges basically to get those, to allow some of these microbes to really work on them very quickly. So, and larger things like worms or whatever to work on them really quickly. So if you can put them out on the driveway and run your mower back and forth across them a couple times and then blow them back into bed, they will break down much, much quicker. So that's one way to do it. You can buy some sort of tub grinder or something like that if you want to. I find those things a little bit, maybe a good one out in the world, one of these ones that have the weed eater down at the bottom, or you can pile them up. Some people will pile them up and just take their weed eater and run across them. All you're trying to do is rip the leaf just a little bit. And once you do that, they're much more likely to break down quicker. This person's in East Texas, wants a topiary conifer that they can use in the southwestern sun. Junipers are probably going to be your friend down in East Texas for sure. I highly recommend, if you want conifers in the Southeast, to get the, is it Conifers of the Southeast and Ginkgos or something is the name of that book that Tom Cox and Dr. Reuter did. Tom Cox, we went and visited. It's probably been like 3 years ago now. He passed away not long after that visit to his garden, the Cox Arboretum, which is north of Atlanta. If you're interested, I think it's still open. I think grandson or something is running it now, and maybe his daughter and a grandson or something like that. But it's still open if you want to go. And there's a giant conifer collection in that garden. That garden was really fun to visit. And he wrote that book with Dr. Reuter, who we've also done a video with at UGA. And Tom actually gave me that book and signed it. And then I've carried it around a bunch of times, run into Dr. Reuter multiple times and had not gotten him to sign it. So at some point, I'm going to match up having that book with me and being with Dr. Reuter. I actually went to a talk he gave in Columbus a few weeks ago and learned a ton. Dr. Reuter, the ton of knowledge about growing conifers in the Southeast. That's what the talk was in Columbus. But I highly recommend that book if you want to. They literally, they didn't try everything. You can't try everything, but they tried a lot of conifers in the Southeast and observed them. But that garden is near Atlanta if you're interested in going. I don't know what the hours or anything are anymore. Let's see, or how you may have to reserve a time to visit it. I don't really know. This person says spider mites are big this year in their Piedmont, North Carolina. The Piedmont is kind of the middle section of North Carolina. If you don't know, we have the sand hills or the sandy area down at the coast where it's been under the ocean at at times. And then we have the mountains, obviously, but the middle is the Piedmont area and South Carolina, basically Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. The Piedmont goes down into like Alabama. Lots of clay soil, mostly, in the Piedmont area of North Carolina. They had some heavy early rains, and then they're seeing tons of spider mites. So I have some spider mites on a red verbena next to the driveway out there. It's on that big slope out there, and it really drains almost too well. And if we water something out there, I tend not to water that driveway area. It's just out of the way for the hose over there. And so it tends to be a little bit neglected. So I imagine it's, obviously just stress related. Some of those verbena just will get spider mites, but they're seeing them everywhere. Why? Your plants are under stress. Stress and mites are, they just kind of go together. If you bring, I've got gardenias outside. We're going to have a couple questions like this. I think in this one or the next one, Steph had said a couple questions that were kind of like this. Stress leaves plants vulnerable to spider mites. It can be low light. It can be low overwatering, underwatering. All kinds of situations will allow mites to attack plants, but typically they don't attack healthy plants. If they attacked healthy plants, we just wouldn't have plants. Because they're pretty efficient at doing damage to them. Think about a spider mite as being on the earth to take out inferior plants or plants that before that plant can sicken everything else. The mites just kind of eliminate it. And so, that's the way I think of them. And we have, like I got a gardenia over there. It's perfectly healthy outside. It's thriving. It's blooming right now. If I take that thing in the house for the winter and put it in low light conditions with low humidity, the heat's on all winter, mites just, if mites can get to it, they're on it. You'll see that if you bring plants into spaces and conditions they don't like. Sometimes it really, really happens in a nursery setting where we're over pushing things, where we're over fertilizing things, overstimulating them. So that's also a possibility of a good way to get mites. We think about when a plant, visually to a human being, if a plant is growing, it's got new growth on it, then it's healthy. But to say, going back to those sky pencil hollies I talked about, I took a 1 gallon, I'll take a cutting on a sky pencil holly in June or July every year. I stick the cutting in the greenhouse. I could have planted them by late summer. They were rooted well enough, but I would always overwinter my cuttings in the house for the winter, and then I'd put them in a gallon pot. Then I'd push them as hard as I could in that gallon pot with a 12-month fertilizer. grow. That fall, that first fall, after I'd pushed them a bunch of times, I've also cut them several times just to keep stimulating growth. And then I pop them into a 3-gallon pot, hit them again, fertilize them again, bam, 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 as fast as I can get that thing to grow. And to me, again, visually, looks healthy. It's growing. I mean, if it's growing, it must be healthy, but those plants were far more vulnerable to spider mites. You'll just see it. Butterfly bushes pushed with heavy fertilizer in a nursery situation, almost certainly going to get mites. There's just a ton of things that were really vulnerable to it in a nursery setting. So I really got to see it there. You know, that, man, this same plant that just rarely ever gets spider mites in the ground, you know, in a nursery setting, boy, that just flocks to them. And you think, well, maybe it's a monoculture, I'm growing things too close together. But what's actually happening is that plant's under stress. You know, and again, to us, it looks healthy. But it's, you know, it's just not. Something's happening on the inside where this is not a natural thing to try to grow 7 months out of the year, you know, by inches a month is an unnatural state of growth. So I don't know which of those problems it is. I don't know if it's the up and down of the rain, the up and down of the temperature, you're over fertilizing them, you could under fertilize them, obviously, and get the same problem. So I don't know. The why is impossible to know. But, you know, I will say just continue to work on your soil, continue to work on, you know, drainage issues, if you have drainage issues, all those kinds of things. There are some plants, though, that seem that, you know, and ground cover verbena is one of them, that I see more often in the ground, you know, having mites without explanation. And some of it can be cultivar-related issues, too. You know, I talked about the butterfly bushes being very vulnerable to it. Every yellow butterfly bush I ever grew at the nursery would get mites badly. We'd have to use a miticide in any yellow butterfly bush we ever used. It seemed like they were inferior cultivars, right? So the mites are coming along trying to destroy it, and I'm trying to save it with a miticide. But the mites are going, hey man, this is not a quality plant. It needs to go away before it sickens other plants potentially. So that's just kind of how they operate. How is the copper top sweet viburnum doing? I've got 2 different sweet viburnums from the Southern Living Plant Collection out here. Copper top is over here, and it's got some actually great new color on it right now. And then I have the other one in the front garden. Some of the questions related to, so this is the spider mite question up here. The first year I had the sweet viburnum on the front foundation out here, which is now this tall. For the first 2 years, I had some white flies on it. So especially this time of year, late summer, I could go over there and just hit that plant and white fly. It was like a white fly fog coming up on it. If you've had gardenias, maybe you've had white flies in the past. There are some plants that are more susceptible. They tend to like really dark green, thick leaf plants, you know, for some reason. Other things too, but a lot, you know, you get a lot of white flies in greenhouses where there's no air movement. You know, it's a flying little creature that would not like 20-mile-an-hour winds at all. Typically, though, I'll take a water hose and just spray them off, just like I would aphids or something like that. And it doesn't knock them all down, but I can knock 80% down at one time by just kind of, you know, with the water hose and control them. This year, there's not a white fly out there. So something happened where that plant is now seems like it's able to protect itself a little bit better from it. So plants in time, you know, given time, conditions change, you know, it rooted in enough, it found the nutrient it was missing, whatever. I don't have any idea. Again, the why is impossible for me to, you know, to know from a question. But plants do sometimes they go the wrong way, obviously, you know, and new problems come in, but a lot of times they can also correct problems, you know, at some point as well. But the copper top viburnum and the other sweet viburnum out front really look fantastic right now. We are right on the cusp here in zone 8A of winter burning them just a little bit. You'll see more sweet viburnums as you go further south to the Gulf. I got one on a foundation over here and one tucked up in around some other evergreen things over here. Let's see. Okay, and then here's another question about azaleas. They had a good spring bloom and then they got hit by lace bugs and they cut them in half. They flushed back out, looked good. Now lace bugs came back. any way to break this cycle. They have good soil, well-drained mulch, 6.6. You know, they didn't mention the sun exposure, so I don't know if they're in too much sun or too little sun, or, you know, whatever. I wouldn't know. Again, I don't know why. I've got, I had a couple azaleas at the old house that, you know, they were old-fashioned indica azaleas, and they were on the right side of my garage, and they had spider mites every year. And I don't know if the soil that was pushed over there was different. You know, when the house gets built and they start moving soil around the house and compacting things more or whatever, didn't have a single lace bug in the rest of the garden anywhere. Nor do I have a single one here. Of course, we had them at the nursery. Again, you're packing plants tight together and you're pushing them and pushing them and pushing them. So these insect problems, come up. So really hard to have an organic plant nursery for that reason, just because, again, you're actually asking for problems sometimes when you're overstimulating them, overstressing them. But I don't have a single, lace bug in this garden. Not a one. I mean, I can go to every azalea in here and find a lace bug in here. So why? I couldn't tell you why those lace bugs on the right-hand side of my garage on those southern indica azaleas had them. They were in a slightly more protected area. So again, maybe wind, open exposure, may have something to do with it. That, if I was going to nitpick what could have been wrong with it, that soil may have been a little more compact. Again, because it was right up against the foundation. Could have been a different type of soil than I had in other areas of the garden. It could be where they pushed the pile of sand after they did the footer for my house, a brick foundation footer for my house. So again, I can't explain that, why one plant here, one plant there. Whether they'll break the cycle again, my sweet Viburnum out there on the front foundation broke that cycle this year. May not be broken forever. You can try to move them. I mean, it's one option. It's definitely to try to move them. Again, though, I would examine the area and see if, there's something about that area where it's, too shady, too compact. I don't know. Again, some of these questions are really hard to answer. But some of them get asked a bunch of times, and I'll skip them a few times, and then, I see them again, and then I'm like, well, I'm going to go try to answer it, but it's not going to be a good answer because I cannot know why one plant in your garden would get attacked and the one in my garden is not getting attacked. Obviously, the defenses for yours are lowered for some reason, and I don't know that. Sun, shade, wet, dry, all kinds of reasons that could be. What is fall planting? September ? Well, obviously fall is September 20th or whatever official day that fall starts. But I really think it's when, there's a noticeable slowdown in everything in the garden. Conifers will continue to grow some into the fall, and right up in here in Raleigh, we'll get growth right over the winter on some of our conifers. Can literally grow the entire winter. I would say here in Raleigh, I would call fall October 15th-ish. It's when I would say you have consistent nighttime temperatures below 50. Like, you're not going to get many nights above 50 at that point. That problem is last year we had nights in the 60 degree Fahrenheit all the way through November. So that was a really non-fall fall. So I would say nights below 50s. You gotta, there's a couple videos now about watering in the fall. I don't know which one will have come up before this video or after this video, but there's two separate videos, one about watering in the fall and the other about planting in the fall. And both of them, I think, will help answer some of these questions about fall planting in general, what I would or wouldn't plant in the fall. I've got a lot of experience with this. I was a landscaper for a long time. I was guaranteeing plants, and, I'm risk averse. So it was nice to, in the fall, October, November, we would go and do lots of hardscape stuff, lots of bed prep. We'd put all the hardy plants in that I was confident would survive that winter well, because I want to get them established if I can for that customer. But we would wait till spring to come back in and plant some other things. So, that video on fall planting is probably a good one for you. They have some grasses to plant in Virginia. Should they hold on to them in containers? I'll leave that one up to you. Again, I don't like to plant a whole. If you were going to plant those grasses, I'd go get them in the ground tomorrow. After you see this video, I'd go get them in the ground. Summertime is a good time to plant perennials. I talk about some, you know, we talk about dividing some perennials in the fall. You'll see, if you Googled when is the best time to divide hosta or whatever, it's going to say fall or early spring. If it's a tender thing, you know, like one of these agapanthus or something, it's probably going to say late winter, early spring, and definitely not in the fall. But really, you know, when roots are actively growing on herbaceous perennials, they really transplant well. They really divide well. So, I mean, I think peak summer is an ideal time to do some of those things. And I'll do some of those things in this garden. And Tony and I have had this conversation in the past, you know, Plant Delight, Tony at Plant Delights, that summer is a great time. When these grasses have active root systems on them, when you plant them in the ground, they just start rooting really, really quickly. You can, again, I'd put the grasses in the ground sooner the better if you're planning on planting them now. If not, I'd carry them through. I wouldn't plant them in November if it were me. Okay, let's see. Okay, so USDA Zone Map, this is question number 11, hardiness zones. Where do they come up with the limit set for each plant? Who tests each species? Universal testing system, and how extensive is it? There's really no testing for this other than what humans have tested in their own gardens over time. I don't want to say everything, but lots of plants have been tried all over the place. If I tell you this Loropetalum is hardy in zone 7 to 9, somebody's tried it in zone 5. I can assure you of that, and 4, and 3 probably. It's been tried. The same thing with Osmanthus fragrans over there. Everybody would love to grow it, and it's probably really only hardy in zones. You'll see 7 to 9 or 7 to 10. 7 to 10 probably, really 7B, consistently hardy. But, you know, plants have just been tried all over the place. You could probably find university testing for people, folks who have seen what temperatures roots die on plants. So, you know, if something's up in a container and it's exposed, you know, I said this in a video the other day, I mean, a crepe myrtle probably will not be killed in the ground until it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit or 5 below Fahrenheit. Maybe an old one, maybe 10 degrees below Fahrenheit before it would actually be really, really significantly damaged. But if that thing's sitting up above the ground in a pot, probably 15 degrees Fahrenheit or so could kill the roots on it. So the upper part wouldn't matter anymore, right? If all the roots got killed on it. So it's more, so the USDA Hardiness Zone Map is created by 2 15-year sets of data with the average low temperatures in different locations all over the country. So, you know, this is just 2 data sets combined together to create what is the average low temperature over the last 30 years in our gardens. We've seen the last update to the map saw a significant increase in nighttime temperature across the whole country. Everybody moved about 2.5 degrees or 2.5, about 2.5 degrees on their low temperature or something crazy like that. This is nighttime temperatures, not daytime temperatures. Or low temperatures, not high temperatures, obviously. So everybody saw, so like half of the country went into something, not exactly half, but slightly more or slightly less than half the country moved a half a zone up. So we went from 7B on the map. We were right on the edge of 8 anyway, but we went from 7B on the map to 8A. Lots of people went from 7A to 7B, 6B to 7, blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, the plants, you know, you still can have the potential for those lowest cold temperatures that you always got. So to say the average low temperature is increasing, and it is, you know, you look at these maps, each update after each update, we've got an increasing average low temperature, but it doesn't mean your actual low temperature is any different than it was. It just means that 4 out of 5 nights seem warmer. The 5th night, though, could kill these plants regardless. So I think the map has become slightly less useful in time. Talked about that in a couple videos. But there's no then single person. And now you come back around and you go, well, everybody says this Loropetalum is hardy in zone 7 to 9. You know, if you look at whoever the breeders are or whoever's selling Loropetalum, you'll see the tag says 7 to 9 or 7 to 10. When you got moved from 6B into 7A on the last map update, that does not mean this Loropetalum is necessarily any hardier than it is in your garden than it was before. It does mean there's going to be winters probably that it's going to survive more than it did in the past, but there's also still going to be winters where you're still going to get those same low temperatures you always got that could kill that plant. So again, I think it's become slightly less useful. There is no universal testing thing though out there in the world. It's really it died in my yard, so I don't think it grows here. And then a lot of times that doesn't even matter, because there's another list of things beyond cold that could kill your plants in the winter. It could be winter wet. It could be exposure, wind blowing across them. There may still be a place in your garden that plant will grow, with or without temperature being the main driver of that. This person has a compost in a tumbler for 5 years. Is it usable? You could probably add some material to it. They were asking if they could add some browns and greens, so grass clippings or whatever, and get it going again. That's probably what I would do. I'd definitely be flipping it a few times. I just don't want to put anaerobic stuff out in my garden beds. Especially if it smells funny, I'd still use it. I just want to wake it up. So you can add some material to it, get it going, flip it over a few times, let it dry out, a little bit, by flipping it a few times. Let's see. This person's always used pecan mulch in Oklahoma because their dogs eat other mulches. Now that they're older, they might try pine mulch again. Do they need to remove the old pecan mulch? That's a good question, because pecan, I might say both of those too, just like I say clematis. Cover the word police. I don't know how thick it is. So that would be the question, right? How thick is it? If it's like this thick, maybe. That stuff takes forever to break down. If it's just a very, very thin layer at this point left in the space, I'd mulch right over top of it and keep moving, not worry about it. But I've dug those things out of the ground where squirrels have planted them in the ground a long time after, and they're still hard under the ground. So it's a really good question that can only be answered by you. It just in how, if it's like this thick and you want to change over to something else, you might have to thin that down a bit to get the new mulch on top to actually not end up with a dry socket in between mulch and the soil. This person wants to keep their Asclepias tuberosa from seeding and spreading. Should they cut off the seed pods? And can they leave them in the beds to compost? So lucky your Asclepias tuberosa is spreading so fast and seeding so fast. Other folks are growing it and growing tiny little plants about this big and struggling with it a little bit. So congratulations. If you cut off the seed pods and throw them on the ground, if the seed is fully formed, then you've just seeded it on the ground. You've just helped the plant out. You have to get it between that pollination, where bees and whatever are landing on those flowers. Before that seed is fully formed, you'd have to cut it off in order to throw it on the ground and not have the seed come up. So, that's you have a short window between when something gets pollinated and when it fully forms a seed, viable seed. So if you were going to throw them in the bed and you were trying to prevent it from seeding itself, you need to be on top of it all the time. Allowing the pollinators to enjoy the flowers and then cutting it off. Okay, the rest of the plant obviously could be taken advantage of by caterpillars. Okay, this person is in 7A, Hudson Valley, New York. Maybe 15-year-old neglected weigela, looking bad. Do they take well to shaping, pulling out dead wood, rejuvenate, pruning? Or is it best to pull it out because of the age? Not worried about the bloom next year. Yeah, you could cut it to the ground if you wanted to during the winter. You could selectively prune it. Probably what I would do is selectively prune it down to 3 or 4 canes. So my weigela that's probably out of frame here, one of our weigelas here. This one has down below, looks like maybe 6 or 8 vertical pieces coming out of the ground. And the plant looks pretty good. It's still flowering pretty good. At some point, you get so many suckers down there that they start competing with one another a bit. And so the best way to actually prune them is to take out the oldest wood on these suckering plants. So there's a couple strategies. One, you could cut it to the ground, and then when it starts coming back up, and it's going to come back up with pieces all over the place, you can select 6 or 8 of them and then try to control the other ones back down to the ground. Or you could go into that plant this winter and you can probably visually see which ones are the oldest parts of the plant, and you can cut that down to the ground and keep the more vigorous younger growth that's happened in the last few years, and maybe keep 4 or 6 upright pieces. That would be so that's 2 separate strategies you could use to do this. All right, how do patented plants work? I guess they just want questions around patented plants. So a person who finds a new plant, either through breeding, through selection of crossing different, sometimes species, sometimes within the same species, sometimes you get lucky and you find something that's obviously different in some way. You find a variegation on something. They're patentable. So we get 20-year patents on plants. Really, I don't think it's quite long enough because it's not like other things out in the world that you can patent. Like if I patent a fork, I don't know why I'd patent a fork, and this is probably a weird example. If I patent a new kind of fork, the new Jim Putnam 7-tine fork, okay, I could probably get a manufacturer to manufacture that thing almost immediately, and I could have it at market next year. Within 2 years, I could get some, company somewhere around the globe to make this thing for me, and we'll be selling it, right? There's 2 different things too. There's trademarks and patents. I'll explain the difference in a second. But let's say you get a patent on a plant. It might take me 3 years to grow that plant, right? I've got to convince other growers that it's a good plant. I might have to have landscape architects, landscape designers, magazines, trade magazines. I might have to convince Home Depot, the buyers at Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart. There are just because I say it's a great plant, other nurseries and other gardens may want to just trial it in a trial area for some period of time before they're convinced it's a really good plant, or it's actually new in some way or different in some way. Sometimes it can take 6 or 8 years to actually ramp up the availability, and it leaves typically a very short clock. We got to get super efficient. I'm on calls, frequently, about patented plants, naming plants, and so going through the trademarking a name that is not used already, but boy, we have really used up some plant names. It's really harder and harder and harder to name a plant and have that name match that plant in some way. So that part's hard. So you trademark some sort of name on it, and then you get the patent. But it's important. It's an important thing, and I know some people are, I don't understand how you can patent a living thing. Well, keep in mind, some of these, we've had a lot of, and you can go back through the channel. I did a series for a little while, this horticulture master series that I was doing, where I was, we were interviewing some of the best plant, the top plant breeders in America. If we go down and visit, Bobby Green with these amazing October Magic series of camellias, him and his father doing camellia breeding for decades. Decades. Half a century they've been involved in breeding camellias. It's their life's work. To say that, they should just be able to release this thing out into the world and not receive anything back from it is an odd, I think an odd reaction from some people. I think so. It was 30 years, 40 years, to get dwarf redbuds. 30, 40 years to get yellow and purple to show up in the same exact redbud. Have repeat blooming azaleas and all the incredible hydrangea paniculatas. Limelight, I don't know how many they sold, over the patent of that plant. That one's off patent, but they've got some new improved ones on that. But again, sometimes a lifetime of work goes into these things. It's not like you go out. Sometimes there's the lucky plant where there's a gold piece on this plant, and I'm going to go take that cutting, and wow, it rooted, and wow, it looks good, and I'm so lucky. But a lot of the plant breeding out there is nothing like that. It is sometimes you're waiting for the right plant to show up in your lifetime to cross it. I mean, the way that repeat flowering azaleas worked was decades and decades of crossing different azaleas until one weird azalea came along, and that's not even really an attractive plant at all, came along, and it was crossed with some of our other existing varieties of azaleas, and bam, we had a fall blooming azalea. But it made no sense. It's not the plant that it's crossed with is not an attractive plant in any way. So again, I'm adding a little bit of passion to this because I want to make sure folks understand that sometimes this is a lifetime of work in protecting these people's patent rights for what is a very short window, really. If you consider how long it's going to take to get that plant to market, by the time you're buying that plant at market, something like that Juliet Clara, it probably has ticked 6 years off the clock already. That's how that works. And then trademark names last forever. So the trademark, that will still be, I don't know if that's trademarked or not, but that trademark name will still be out there. Autumn Lilac for that Encore Azalea over there. It's the trademark name. The patent name is a different name. The patent part is 20 years. So there you go. But again, I add a little bit of passion to it because I do believe that in order for us to continue to get interesting genetics out in the world, in order to have people motivated to do that, and it's their life's work, and they've gone through a lot of school and a lot of time and a lot of passion around something, saying that 20 years, is a long time is not really. Okay. This person loves chip drop, but they only need 15 yards. How do you calculate how much mulch you need? There are mulch calculators online. You can quickly just Google mulch calculator. You just step off the area, figure out the actual square footage of it, and then figure out how deep you want the wood chips. So over there on the side over there, I put about 6 inches of wood chips this year. It varies. You're not going to get exactly 6 inches everywhere. It's probably 5 inches in one spot and 8 inches in another, obviously. But I can step that whole thing off, see what I think it was 100 feet by 30 feet, so that's 3,000 square feet, and I wanted it 6 inches deep, and then you do the mulch calculator, and it'll tell you how many cubic yards that you need for that. If you only need 15 yards, I'd put it out on Facebook Marketplace to some other people. I've got a couple buddies in the neighborhood that will come and scoop up a couple yards when I get a chip drop over here. That they only need a small amount for a few paths they're doing or whatever. So see if you can share. You may have a neighbor that would want to come over and load up a pickup truck with a fork and, do a couple things around their garden. Let's see. And then this person, same person asked, do I need to pull back my commercial mulch on existing beds before adding fresh chips? I would put wood chips directly over mulch as long as it's, again, we were asking that very specific pecan question over here. That breaks down really slowly. So as long as it's like a normal triple shredded hardwood or pine bark or something like that, you can go right over the top of it. Are there any large shade trees that are easier to plant under? I think I've said a bunch of times over the years, I think just in general, oaks are easier to garden with overall. Live oaks can be a little tricky. You don't see, there's some great gardens under live oaks in the deep south, but live oaks, despite being evergreen, they're similar to big leaf magnolias where they just drop leaves constantly. So there's a constant leaf drop that could be kind of a pain. But like white oaks, this white oak back here, I don't have any problem gardening around it. It's so established that it's been difficult to get other things established around it. But if you put in a tree and then put in your garden at the same time and they establish themselves together, then you won't have that issue that I have back here, which is one got a 90-year head start above it before everything else did. Let's see, one by one, all of their dogwoods are dying from blight or whatever, root rot related, whatever, Phytophthora or whatever they're succumbing to. What do they do with the dead ones? So they ask if they could burn, if they could burn it. Yeah, you could burn it if you wanted to. Probably needs to leave the, or leave the property in some way or another. But yeah, you got a couple things you got to be careful with tools, right? If you're going to go out there and saw something down, make sure that same saw doesn't end up on a healthy plant somewhere. There are areas in which you could definitely move these things around in your garden. There are dogwoods all over this neighborhood that are in a slow process of dying in these. I see healthy ones as well, but the really, really healthy, vigorous ones I see are ones that aren't in these spaces where people are mowing grass around them and putting foot traffic on them and that kind of thing. There's a really, really nice one just over my neighbor's thing back here, sticking out of the woods, right where dogwoods love to live. They love to live right on the edge of the woods with the top of the plant sticking out in the sun, bottom of the plant down in the shade. Those seem healthy to me. The ones that I see around the neighborhood that are really, that don't seem happy are the ones that are in really compacted front gardens with mowers, people putting foot traffic around them pretty consistently. So anyway, but I would burn it or, dispose of it off property somehow. How old is the Carolina Midnight Loropetalum? It was a 3-gallon plant that was purchased at Walmart. No, it was purchased at Kmart. A long time ago. And so that thing's been in the ground over 10 years actually. And so I can cut it down to 4 feet and it'd be 12 feet again before the season's over. So it's got a big root system on it. But it didn't take that long to get to this height, so it's been like this now for about 5 years. So it took about 5 years or so. So this person, before they started watching the channel, they planted a long line of emerald arborvitae soldiers, and they're in the triad. So the triad, this part of North Carolina is called the Triangle. It's Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill, but I now think it's more like Raleigh, Durham, Cary. Cary has grown so much that it seems like the third part of the triangle more than Chapel Hill does. And the triad is Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and High Point. And so 3 cities. I'm going to one day combine. They're growing together so rapidly. One day I'm just going to call the whole thing the decadahedron. That has been my long-term joke, that eventually they just be the same place. So they planted a row of emerald arborvitae soldiers, one after another. They're dying. I see this all over this neighborhood. I should probably walk around at some point and just show this off. Thuya occidentalis is native to north of Pennsylvania up into Canada. So yeah, in our North Carolina gardens, they really don't want to be there. It doesn't mean that there's not nice ones. There's really nice ones in the neighborhood, and I have several dwarf ones here in this garden, but we make sure we make sure we water them. If it's dry here, that's one of the things that's always going to be on the list to water. And they grow super fast in a nursery setting with lots of water thrown on them. And boy, you can get emerald and other Thuya occidentalis to grow feet a year in a container by throwing water and fertilizer at them. They are, as long as you keep those roots kind of cool on them. They've been dying out. They don't want to replace them with the same. What would I do? I'd start plugging in other things, other conifers. You could plug in some other junipers, Chamaecyparis. If you want to keep a line of conifers, obviously you're in zone 8A, I guess maybe in Greensboro or something. There's lots of leafy evergreens you could use as well. I mean, you can use a lot of what I have in this mixed border back here. I think I did this screening plant video earlier in the year with there's 13 or 14 plants in this line, different things. Every one of them is available to you to use in that line, but that's what I would start doing, is plugging in some leafy evergreens or some other conifers as these die. I think you'll find that the ones that haven't died would appreciate to have other things planted near them that could help shade their roots, help keep them cooler during the summertime months as well. So there you go. There is, I think I actually did 21 questions from this past week. Ask gardening questions down below in the comment section below this video. Steph and I are going to be doing some traveling. We had gone to Europe a few weeks ago. That content is still coming on the channel. We've done most of the Boskop related content at this point. And not all of it's been watched a whole lot. I understand that it's not necessarily, what people are looking for. They're looking for probably more of what I normally do here in this garden. But I think some of those videos are pretty interesting, and some of the things that they can grow in the Netherlands is absolutely amazing. I think the video from, as you're watching this on Sunday, the video that will have gone up on Wednesday was at Nico and Marlene's garden with Nico in his garden, and he's introduced a bunch of climbing hydrangea varieties out into the world, and several other things as well. So I thought that they were just really super nice people. There is an upcoming video where we visit the Better Boxwood breeder, the Butterfly Candy breeder, all kinds of things. The King and Queen's Palace in east of the Netherlands. But that trip was a few weeks ago. We've got some other things coming up. We're going to be visiting a seed company. That's going to be fun, that you guys are going to see. We're going to be visiting our friends up at North Creek Nursery and Gateway Garden Center up there. We'll hopefully have filmed that already by the time this video goes up. We're going to be filming at the Cleveland Botanic Garden. We're going to be filming at a couple gardens actually in Cleveland. We're going to be filming. I'll leave the rest of it as surprises. We've got a lot of upcoming content coming up that I'm pretty excited about seeing. Some things we have seen before and some things we haven't seen before, or some things we haven't shown you guys before. So thank you guys so much for following along. Again, ask questions down in the comment section down below the video. The old t-shirts are on sale on the website, and we're gonna have a couple more t-shirt designs coming up before a little bit later in the fall that I'm pretty excited about as well. So thanks for watching.